Hi, welcome to Growth Hackers, the program where we talk about how you can use digital to grow your business. I'm Godfrey Parkin, and today I want to talk a little bit about education, because education is one of those things that in many ways has been affected quite dramatically by the evolution of digital, and in many ways has not. It's one of those areas which is historically so tied down in how it used to be that it doesn't want to move forward. I've been involved in education, e-learning, ed tech as it's called these days, for pretty much most of my business career. I started out working for AC Nielsen, the big market research company, and found myself running their International Management Services Center based out of Switzerland, taking care of about 30 or 40 countries back in the days before the internet. Back in the days when if you needed to do something, you had to get on a plane and go and spend a few days or a few weeks with the company to help them get through a particular situation, which was hugely inefficient when you think about the time and the money that went into doing that kind of thing. But at the same time, the personal computer had just emerged, and these companies around the world started to acquire one and then two and then several. And I got involved in doing personalized learning by sending people floppy disks by courier, because you couldn't email files back in those days. But it saved me a huge amount of time, it saved me a lot of travel, and it saved the company a lot of money. And from there I started to get involved in programmed learning, in online training, and all sorts of other areas. And when I eventually left AC Nielsen, I started my own company, which was a games development company. Based out of London. And one of the focuses that we were trying to do was to build a virtual world so we could do simulation-based education and training, largely for business people. So I go back a long way in terms of ed tech. I ended up in the United States running an e-learning company that was teaching project management, which within a year became the world's largest e-learning company in terms of its revenues. So I'm a big believer in using technology to enhance education. I know that some of the programs that we ran in the United States, when we ran them through the University Ratings Agency in the United States called ACE, I think in South Africa the equivalent would be CETA, we were given 2 graduate credits for each one of our courses, whereas the classroom equivalent with exactly the same content was given undergraduate credits. So the quality of the learning that we produced was fantastic. We had a first-time pass rate in the industry exam of 100%. We knew, and I knew, that online learning had huge potential. People loved it, they didn't want to stop, and it was enormously profitable compared with doing things the old way of having a building and a classroom and a teacher coming in and talking. That evolution, because it was in fact an evolution, e-learning was something relatively new in the 1990s. I used to speak at conferences where people would argue with me about whether or not computers could ever teach anybody anything. But it evolved very rapidly. Once people get their hands on the technology, once they start experimenting with it, once they start doing things and start seeing the results in their learners, they start to become true believers in the technology. And indeed, I went on to do quite a lot of consulting work with other companies who were building things like universities online and working with various government agencies and so on to help them get their own systems up and running. Today, e-learning is available to anybody. There is no reason why, if you're interested in a particular subject, whether it's something as generic as astrophysics or something as specific as how to use your cell phone to make a television commercial, you will find a course online that will show you and teach you how to do it. Now, for the average person, that's something which is truly brilliant, because you're not dependent on your local neighborhood. You're not dependent on going to an institution and paying them a fee and learning on their schedule. You can do it whenever you feel like doing it. You can take your class at 2 o'clock in the morning if you feel like doing that. And it's not going to cost you much, and in most instances it's going to be free. The potential that has for the individual to advance themselves and to grow themselves in their own career is enormous, because there are no excuses anymore. There is no reason not to learn how to do things better, not to be inspired to do things differently, and not to educate yourself to a point where you are, in fact, a highly qualified professional in your field without having to take the time out and the money to go and do a professional certification course through a traditional institution. You'll find that there are institutions like Coursera.com is huge, and everything that is on there is free. Most of it, of course, is not what I would classify as good e-learning. It's where e-learning was back in the 1990s. It's talking head videos rather like this one, supplemented by the odd PowerPoint slide that might come in across the front. But it's professors or it's experts who know what they're talking about and are delivering exactly the same content they would be delivering to a university classroom in an auditorium. So you can find on Coursera thousands of courses in every single subject that you can imagine, and nearly all of it is completely free to participate in. There is a site called openculture.com. Openculture.com is really a listing or an index of all the online courses that are available for free and whether or not you actually get any accreditation for them. Udemy.com, udemy.com, has a combination of free content and paid content. And again, you can find really good content from university academics from the top universities in the world, all the way down through a lot of the commercial business training providers that are out there. There's also a really interesting site called Allison.com, ALISON.com. On Allison.com, you've got university level courses and curricula. And not only are they free, but you actually get the academic credit for doing the work without having to pay for it. So you can build up a series of credits which you can then trade in for a university degree, either a bachelor's or a master's degree, if you so desire, without ever having to once go to university. If you want to do something more pure with a single university, Stanford, Harvard has a thing called Harvard Extension, Yale has a thing called Open Yale. All of these big Ivy League and top level universities in America and increasingly in Europe are now offering a lot of their courses online for free. So you can go and sit in on a Harvard class in actuarial science or in leadership. And you can do it either directly through Harvard or you can do it through something like Coursera or Udemy. You will not get the academic credit for it because you haven't paid to take the course. But you will get a certificate saying that you actually did the course. And if you want to do the exams, you can start paying the fees. Bottom line, though, is that you can get a really good education from the world's top universities without spending a lot of money and without having to stop working because you do it in your own private time. But that's university level, and in a way that is backed in from e-learning, which really started at the corporate level, corporate training of people in management skills and business skills. What about schools? Now, schools are a problem. The school education system, and I may be offending some people who are teachers when I say this, but the school education system has at its core not changed since the 19th century. We still work with a system of physical buildings where people have to come to a school. We have physical classrooms where people have to go into the classroom, and we have a teacher standing in front of what today is probably a whiteboard, or maybe a digital screen, used to be a chalkboard. Teaching micro modules of a curriculum that is isolated from all the other subjects that they are learning. So when you're in school, you learn mathematics, and you're taught mathematics by a mathematics teacher. And then the bell rings, and you find yourself in a classroom with somebody who is teaching literature or physics. And then the bell rings and you move on to another subject. There is no cross-subject interaction, and there's very, very little attempt to relate the subject matter that you're learning to life. So learning to life doesn't really happen until you're on your own when you finish school. And subject-to-subject interaction only happens when you're going, okay, I need to put up a picture and I need to measure out the geometry of this thing, so I put the nail in the right place. And then the physics of it is what size hammer do I need? Is it a concrete wall? Is it? All of those cross-subject things don't happen in school because schools are taught on a siloed subject basis. In some schools that is changing, but only in the lower levels, because once you get into high school, the performance of your school is determined by your exam pass rate. And so once you get into certainly the last 3 or 4 years of your high school, the teacher is really driven by getting those kids through the exam. They're not interested in doing anything else. And actually, the kids and the parents are not particularly interested in doing anything else either. But what happens then is you end up with kids who are remembering what they need to remember in order to pass the exams. They're not relating subjects to each other, and some of these subjects that you're taught in school interact so intimately. Physics, chemistry, mathematics are all part of the same family of knowledge. And you end up with a situation where kids have to learn things because they have to learn them because they've got to pass the exam. They don't learn them because they want to learn them. So what does digital bring to that party? The ultimate that you should be striving for, and I think this is where schools will probably be going to if they're able to break free from the past, is mission-based learning. And today the mission is to pass the exam. But if you give people in school a bigger picture, a bigger mission that they need to accomplish, and the subjects that they are learning help them to accomplish that mission. In other words, you gamify education. Then learning becomes something which is A, fun, B, motivating, and C, communal, because you learn with your friends as you work towards accomplishing the mission. That happens to a small extent within subjects. You'll give people a project they need to work on, or you might have them work on it in pairs or in threes. But the bigger picture of learning for the sake of learning really hasn't happened. I am a co-founder of a company called MindZoo, MINZU.com. And MindZoo is busy trying to develop a way of teaching kids mathematics, and then we'll move on to physics and chemistry and biology afterwards, in a way which it hasn't been taught before. So what we've done is we've created a virtual world inhabited by characters that are really kind of interesting and quirky in their own way. And those characters are going on a mission through this virtual world. They literally need to rescue a friend from the bad guys. Let's make it as simple as that. But in order to accomplish the different stages of the mission, they need to understand and be able to apply different elements of the mathematics curriculum in the last 2 years of school. So they need to be able to do the core elements of geometry. They need to be able to identify the types of numbers they're working with. They need to be able to resolve equations. And all of that is built into a game. So, as you're passing through the castle, there's a series of flagstones that you may or may not step on, and the mathematical equations will tell you which ones are safe to walk on and which ones are not safe to walk on. And all of that backs into conventional learning using exercises and books, and all of that backs into fragmented learning done in an animated way where there are 25 videos, each of them no longer than 7 minutes, which covers the entire curriculum, but done in a way which brings mathematics to life. And all of that is delivered on a mobile phone. So it's personalized learning, mobile learning, delivered to the device the kids actually want to use. So MindZoo.com is moving in a direction that in some instances is disapproved of by the educational establishment, but it's highly approved of by the learners. And we hope that it's going to be as successful as everybody thinks it is. We're launching it in India, then in Africa, as we go forward over the next couple of months. The approach that we're taking there is really all about stimulating change. Why do schools need to change? Well, If you think about the prime purpose of a school, the prime purpose of a teacher, the prime purpose of education, is to prepare children to survive in their adult future. And a lot of the education and the educational systems that they're working with right now are really all about being nostalgic for the past. The French, for example, have just banned the use, the presence of mobile phones in classrooms. Now, adults applaud that. They think that's a brilliant idea. I think it's an appalling idea. If kids have mobile phones and want to work with mobile phones, what you should be doing to disrupt education and take advantage of that motivation is find a way of exploiting those mobile phones to help learners to learn. You don't change cultural behaviors by banning devices. Just isn't an appropriate thing to do, and it's a very, very retrograde move, in my view anyway. The other thing about education is this. If you look at where artificial intelligence has come from over the last 5 years and where it is going to over the next 5 to 10 years, AI is capable of harnessing data in a way that the human mind is not. You can point an AI at the entire law library in a country, and it can digest the contents of every legal case in a matter of minutes. It can look for patterns, it can recognize patterns, it can come to recommendations, it can come to conclusions. And when you feed a new case into it, it'll know exactly what the precedents are and what happened and where it went. This is what a lawyer does, but a lawyer does it with 6 to sometimes 10 years of academic study where you're learning and learning and learning, and then another 10 years of experience. An AI system can accomplish almost the same thing in a matter of minutes. What does that mean? When I was going to university, parents all wanted you to be a lawyer or a doctor or one of the professions, because that was a guaranteed path to success financially, as well as being a noble thing to do in the community. But if those knowledge-based professions, medicine, for example, I mean, today in China, the AI systems are diagnosing diseases based on scans far more accurately and far faster than human beings can do. What happens to you as a radiologist if a program can do your job better and faster than you can? So you've got to think about the careers of the future are not the careers of the past. There may not be a future in being a lawyer. There may not be a future in being a doctor. There may not be a future in being a radiologist. You've got to think about what those careers are going to be, and then look at the kids in school and say, well, what do we need to teach them in order to prepare them for the real future, as opposed to prepare them for the future that existed in the 1980s? What are the subjects? What are the skills they need to learn? Forget about the knowledge they need to learn. And what is the best way of getting them to grasp, understand, and be motivated by those subjects? And it's not the way we're doing things right now. Things like mathematics are going to become much more important in people's lives. Critical thinking is going to be becoming much more important. Creativity is going to become a great deal more important. And these concepts are going to be significantly more important than subjects like literature and bookkeeping and all the things which at some stage can probably be taken over by computers anyway. So think about the careers of tomorrow and think about what your school is doing to prepare your kids for that. Preparing them to pass the matriculation exam is not doing them a favor. There are bigger pictures out there that they're going to need to deal with. Education is really slow to evolve. It's one of the slowest evolving professions in the world. Which, if you look at what's going on and the changes that are taking place in every other field, and you look at education, it's still doing the same thing that it's always done. Digital hasn't managed to penetrate as much as it should do. Why is that? Technology evolves exponentially. It does that. Education does this. And it does it because it is looking at the wrong measures. it's rewarded for the wrong things. It's all about passing the exam rather than keeping pace with the changes in the world. So if you're exam driven and you're standardized, that tends to entrench this logarithmic change rather than releasing it. And I know it's hard. I know a lot of teachers, I work with them, and parents don't want to let go of it either, because parents want their kids to be taught the way they were taught. You've only got one shot to get a kid through school and your success, and you don't want to mess with it by experimenting. And in the past, experiments have taken place and failed, and people go, no, let's go back to doing things the old way. But I think the time has come where there needs to be a rethink of the way that education actually takes place. It comes from such an old school, almost military, or in fact it is military. The 19th century military academy is the model that we build most of our schools on still today. When we do digital in schools, it tends to go through 4 phases. It goes through, number 1, substitution, then augmentation, then modification, and then redefinition. Substitution is all about saying, we've got books and pieces of paper, let's substitute them with pads, iPads, or graphic tablets. Not a lot different there, except there's a technology element. Augmentation is when we add animations and videos and stuff to make it better. Modification is when we start doing collaborative projects and so on. And redefinition is when we totally rethink what we're doing and approach it from a completely different angle. So digital education is something which I believe needs rethinking. I don't believe that educationalists are the right people to do it. I believe they're really important in that discussion, but I think they need to be poked and jabbed and challenged by people that have got a different perspective in terms of what digital can achieve if you allow it to achieve. And of course, the technology that you're using should be driven by your pedagogical strategy. And in most cases, when I've seen schools do things, that has not been the case. They basically said, okay, we need to do digital, let's give them pads. And the pads become the technology, and then they say, okay, what can we do with the pads? And the technology then starts to dictate your pedagogical strategy, and you end up sub-optimizing all of your expenditure, all of your investment, and all of the opportunity that you potentially could have created. And you end up with commoditized education. You end up with the same generic stuff which is driven by how close did you get to passing that matriculation exam, what was your overall pass rate in your school, and so on. And it's, in effect, you don't actually make any changes at all. But it feels like there's electronics in the classroom, so you've actually made some advances. Schools should go digital for a lot of reasons, and I've only got a couple of minutes left, so let me just go through these quickly. Number 1, if you want to stay relevant to the culture of your learners, you've got to go digital and you've got to go mobile, because that's the planet that they inhabit. Achievement is important. So if you want to achieve more, if you want to produce really, really qualified, smart, capable and competent kids, digital is a way of getting there. If you think about quality and scalability, if you're a school and you've got X number of classrooms and you can fit 20 or 30 people in the classroom before performance starts dropping, if you do things digitally, your school could be 100 times the size, because you're dealing with virtual classrooms rather than real classrooms. You can attract the best talent in teaching if you've got a digital culture in your school. And you can also connect far more closely with parents, because they can see what their kids are doing in a way they couldn't have done before. So there's a lot of reasons for doing that. And there's lots of reasons for experimenting. And I would encourage anybody who is a parent or anybody who is in teaching to start thinking about alternative ways of approaching this, alternative ways of exploiting this massive change that is taking place in the culture that we live in, so that you can actually get to where you want to go. I personally believe that mindzoo.com, this startup that we're launching, product that we're launching in a couple of months' time, is one of the thin ends of that wedge, but there are lots of other guys out there doing that. If you want to know more about that, please contact me, godfrey.parkin@brightfire.com, or through the Facebook page of Deen Channel. But until then, I think we need to take a break. I think we've run out of time for the day. So this is Godfrey Parkin signing out from Growth Hackers.